Hi, welcome to the HR and Volunteer Management Successful Hiring module. I'm Nancy Medema, the Program Director for the Library Support Network, and I'll be your instructor for this session. By the end of this session, you should be more comfortable with understanding the various steps involved in the hiring process, as well as recognizing how to implement them into your own library's processes. Hopefully, you'll be able to look at whatever process you currently have and make some improvements based on what you learn here. There is almost always a connection to the standards and endorsement courses. In this case, standard number 2 discusses the library board's responsibility of hiring the library director. The trustee handbook covers this topic, but you might also want to share other webinars on the topic with your board, especially the webinar on HR and the law put on by Mandy Easter and Marianne Morey. You can find it on the State Library website and on Iowa Learns. Another standard that applies is standard number 24, which requires that the library hire staff based on size. This is a tier 2 standard, so pretty important. As you can see in the chart, the number of staff hours vary according to your population size. Usually, the director will be responsible for hiring staff, evaluating staff, and disciplining staff. Although in larger libraries, these duties could also fall to other supervisory staff. Our main goal in the hiring process is to find the best person for the job. Our libraries are successful because we have people working in them that are devoted to providing great service to our patrons. If you have an HR department in your community, I strongly urge you to contact and work through the process with them. In fact, it might be required that you do so. Let's look at the various steps involved in ensuring that whenever you need to hire staff, you do it right the first time. Hiring someone is an expensive process, and you want to make sure you hire the right person and not have to repeat the process again and again. Although I will say up front that if you do go through the process and aren't happy with the candidates you get, then don't hesitate to repost the position again. You don't want to settle for a candidate just because they applied. Dealing with potential issues down the road is much harder than opening the job again. I mentioned the trustee handbook for when the board hires the director, but you might also find some useful information in there, so check it out. You can find it on the State Library's website. So where do we start this process? First of all, you need to determine if this is a position that needs to be filled. Some questions to ask might include, do we need this position? Can it be combined with another position or split between several? Can we afford it? Probably one of the most important questions you're going to ask. Will we see cost savings in hiring someone new? And do we need the same duties included in this position, or should we make some changes? Once you've determined that you do need a new person, then you want to move on to the next step, which is to review and possibly update the existing job description, or make one if you don't have one. Especially if the person who left had been in the position for a long time, most likely the description will need to be updated, since many of the duties probably changed over time. There is a session in this endorsement program on job descriptions, as well as a recorded webinar with more information, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this step. Consider these things. Your expectations, what are you looking for in this position? What are the primary tasks required most of the time? You don't want unlocking the front door, turning on the lights. You want the main parts of the job, not what everybody does. What duties, such as, are they going to be doing collection development? Are they going to be doing programming for adults or for youth? Are they going to be a customer service person? What qualifications are you looking for, such as their education, their physical requirements, that type of thing? Do they need to have a driver's license because you expect them to do outreach around the community? What supervision details? So who are they supervised by, and do they supervise anyone else? And the KSAs, or the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So KSAs pretty much indicate how well an applicant can show that he or she matches the position's needs. and will be and they determine whether that person will be seriously considered for the job. So let's look at what those are. Your knowledge. That includes, do you have budgeting knowledge? Do you have grant writing experience? Do you have a library science degree? Do you have a college degree? That type of thing. It gets kind of to the specifics. The skills are, do you want them to have experience working on an automated library system, either yours or another one? Do they need to have keyboarding skills? Do they need to know Microsoft Office? Do you want them to have skills in writing newsletters and using software to do that? That type of thing. Their abilities look at, can they work successfully with teens or children? Have they been able to successfully oversee a budget or employees? Have they done supervision in the past? Are they able to work with diverse communities? That type of thing. Your job description will be the basis for your job posting, the criteria upon which you evaluate applicants, and the evaluation guide that you use when it's time to evaluate your newly hired employee. So it's a 3-for-1 document. It's vitally important for this reason, and you really don't want to skip this step. Talk with your city and board about what hours you want them to work, what the wages and benefits will be, that type of thing. Also learn if your city will cover any travel expenses if you have out-of-town or out-of-state applicants that you want to bring in for an interview. In most cases, they don't, but it certainly doesn't hurt to ask. Your city can also assist you with knowing what forms need to be completed by any potential applicants. If the city has a mandatory employee application, you will need to use that as well. New employees will have a lot of paperwork to complete as a city employee, so you'll want to be aware of all of those. Also be aware of any mandatory testing your city may require, such as drug or background checks. Include such testing requirements in your job posting. I will say, however, if your city doesn't require background checks or drug testing, the library cannot require them on their own. I believe it's wise to have all those ducks in a row and to post in the job description the fact that you offer competitive benefits or great insurance plan and the salary range. Some people say not to post the salary range, but I believe it saves a lot of time on your part and on the part of any applicant. For instance, if a librarian sees your job post with no salary range, goes online and thinks your library looks like one that could offer $50,000, applies, and you take the time to interview the person, and then he or she realizes that you can't pay anywhere near that salary range, you've all wasted a lot of time and energy. Be upfront to begin with, and you'll get the application or the applicants that you could be searching for. The next step is to post the job opening. The job must be publicly posted due to the Iowans' veterans preference. Because the library is a city department, you can't just hire someone or promote from in-house without posting the position and going through the interview process. A bit more on this in a moment. Be sure to include the specific requirements for the position, i.e. degrees, training, experience, etc., and determine the amount of time you want the position posted. So it might be 1 week, 2 weeks, a month. You want to give enough time for people to see it and be able to respond, but not so much time that it gets lost and forgotten. Usually no more than a month, but this also varies depending on the job. You can post it for free on the state library's job list site, and you'll also want to post it on your library and city website. Smaller libraries will want to post notices around town, at your library, at other neighboring libraries, on Library Talk. The American Library Association also has a job listing site, but you do have to pay to list there. And there are also other websites that you might want to. Larger libraries who are interested in a national search will want to do this for sure on ALA, but the Association for Rural and Small Libraries also has a jobs posting site. Smaller libraries will likely have as much luck using the state library's job list and Library Talk. And as I said, the ARSL site. And using ARSL actually is a good tool to use if you live on one of the state's borders, because people from other states might see that, like Nebraska or Minnesota or Illinois, Missouri, or you might look at their state libraries and see if they have job posting sites there too. Newspaper ads usually don't bear as many results as they used to, so I would think twice before spending money to post there. You might also try posting at the high school or any colleges near you, again, depending on what position you're looking for. Remember that your job description is going to form the basis for your job posting or your ad. Be sure to specify exactly what you want or what you need the applicant to submit. Example, cover letter and resume, or cover letter, resume, and a list of 3 references, or completed city application and cover letter. Be specific. It can become a test of sorts to see if the applicant can follow directions. Also, be sure to include a contact that interested candidates can use if they have any questions about the position. The contact will likely be the library director. If the library is hiring for a director, the contact will probably be the library board president, or it could be the city's HR director. Again, depends on your community. Integral to providing equal employment opportunities is a practice of openly advertising all available positions. While there's no statute or regulation that explicitly mandates such advertising, the Veterans Preference Law in Iowa Code Section 35C.1 requires cities to post a public notice of the application deadline to fill a public job at least 10 days prior to that deadline. So you're looking at 2 work weeks. The posting requirement is the same as for posting agendas, in that the notice is to be posted in a prominent place, which is easily accessible to the public and clearly for that purpose. The fact that a city has advertised for a position in a newspaper or other publication does not fulfill the posting obligation of the statute. While posting is the legal requirement, advertising open positions on the city and library's website or on profession-specific websites, such as the State Library's job list, is still the best way to secure a large pool of qualified candidates. Once the ad is posted, you'll want to start working on what you want to ask in the interviews or in any preliminary questionnaires. This is a very important step in the success of any new hire. This topic is another webinar called HR and the Law that we have that you can watch. There are a lot of laws around hiring, and you don't want to not be aware of them. Many deal with interview questions, so you want to be careful what you ask and make sure you ask the same questions to each person you interview. The best way to ensure that you're asking the same legal questions is to develop a list before you start the interview process. Then make sure each person involved in the process has a copy of the questions and understands what they can and cannot do. You can also use the rubric you already developed for the candidate selection process to track good responses during the interview process. So you take your job description, you make columns of each of the questions or the things you're asking for, the requirements you're asking for, and then you have a list of your candidates on the side and you make checks on the ones that are fulfilled. That's pretty much your rubric. So what can and can't you ask? You want to ask questions that don't allow for a yes or no answer. You want the candidate to answer in thoughtful, complete sentences that highlight their strengths or weaknesses, including giving examples. Let's look at some. First, this is a terrific tool put out by the Iowa Workforce Development. You can find it on their website. It includes tons of information about the hiring process, including sample questions, things to be careful of during the process, as well as a sample job application. So if your city doesn't have one, feel free to adapt this one and be able to use it. As I mentioned earlier, realize that some questions are illegal. However, you may be able to obtain the basic desired information by rephrasing the question. So in these examples, for nationality, Instead of what's on the screen, you could ask, can you, after being hired, verify your legal right to work in the United States? Another acceptable question is, are you a US citizen or otherwise eligible to work in the United States? Because there are a lot of people who can work and have approval to work from the federal government that aren't necessarily citizens. This question must be asked of all applicants, not just those who appear to be from another country. So again, you have to ask the same question of every applicant. For the age, instead of asking, how old are you? You can ask, are you over the age of 18 or whatever legal age you need? In Iowa, I believe anyone over 14 can work. However, there are some considerations. But for a shelver, you might want them 14. For the marital or family status, instead of asking the questions on the screen, you could say, this job requires some overtime. Are you able to commit to that fact? Or would it be a problem if you were asked to work overtime? For the affiliations, you could ask, do you belong to any professional organizations that you feel are relevant to your ability to do this job? That does kind of get to the information that you might want to know. Do they belong to the Iowa Library Association? Do they belong to ALA or PLA or ARSL? But you're not trying to get to what religious affiliation do they have? What other organizations do they belong to? Those are not legal to ask. For disabilities, you can't ask, do you have any disabilities? However, and we're required to do this, you can say, this job requires that from time to time you're able to lift and or push up to 50 pounds. Think of a full book truck. Are you able to do that? Or, assuming you've thoroughly described the job duties, are you able to perform the essential functions of this job with or without reasonable accommodations? This is the required question that we do for the state. It's the first question we ask. I've never gotten a no response. There are other similar examples and more than the ones I've noted here. Refer to our archived webinar about HR and the law for more information, or the Iowa Workforce Development's website. You'll also want to check them out and look at that successful interviewing guide. It is really full of good information, such as how to avoid discrimination during the hiring process, as well as many sample questions that you can use. All of the following questions are acceptable and legal interview questions. Why did you leave your previous job? Or why did you leave your job with your previous employer, or whatever? Or why are you thinking of leaving your present job? Describe a typical day at your previous or present job. That really gets to what duties they know how to do and can help you evaluate if they're going to be good for your job. What particular parts of your previous job did you enjoy the most or the least? It also kind of gives you some really valuable information. In what areas of past jobs did you have the most success or the least success? How does this job relate to your work experience? That question really helps you determine if they understand the job that you're hiring for, because a lot of times they think it may be a higher position or a lower position. So that is a really good one to ask. What relevant experiences do you have that fall outside paid employment? So here you're looking at any volunteer jobs that maybe they have done in the past that have job experience that can relate to this job. And a lot of times, if you're just hiring someone to work your circ desk, you want customer service experience, and they can get that working anywhere in any retail or medical field, or there's lots of places they can get good customer service experience. What is your educational background? Why did you select your college or your major? How did you do in school? Again, kind of gives you information on their ability to see a project through. What do you think your past or current supervisors will tell us about your work performance? Have you ever been warned or suspended for violating a company work rule? Have you ever been discharged or asked to resign from a job? If yes, please explain. Again, can get some interesting information. Of course, they can lie and not tell you the truth too, but how well do you get along with coworkers? Under what type of supervision do you work best? And I like scenario type questions. So I'm going to describe a type of problem that comes up in this position. How would you handle it? Career-wise, where would you like to be in 5 years? And if selected, how soon would you be able to start? As you can see, you can ask some pretty hard questions, but they need to be general and again, asked of each candidate. This step is where you go through the applications. Depending on how many applicants you have, this could be a time-consuming project, or not if you only have a couple. One good habit is to develop a rubric or spreadsheet that will be used to judge candidates based on their answers, as well as their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and other criteria indicated in the job ad. One reason for doing this step is because many HR departments require proof of the review process. A candidate has the right to contest a hiring decision for various reasons, and a lawyer is going to need and want to see notes and reasons why one particular candidate was selected over another. As you review the applications, you'll immediately eliminate any applicants that do not meet the basic requirements. After that, narrow down the stack by selecting the best. Basically speaking, after you eliminate the applicants that don't fit the bill, you then need to scrutinize the remaining applications. If you have a huge number of applicants, you can further condense your list by compiling a short list that you interview by phone. For instance, from the 30 applicants or applications you get, you narrow it down to 5 or 6 and then phone them or do an online interview. From those interviews, you then narrow it down to 3 or 4 that you invite in for a personal face-to-face interview. Basically, at this point, you're setting aside the candidates who fulfill your requirements and desires set forth in your job description. So again, that job description is very important. The goal, of course, is to find the ideal employee. But remember that the ideal is based upon those required and preferred attributes you set forth in your job description and noted in your job posting. A few words about interviews. Decide if you're going to do the interviewing alone. Some people find it helpful to have a second person to help with interviews in order to get that other person's perspective. The second person could be your assistant director, your board president, or other trustee. Just remember that the director hires other staff, not the board. It might be your city's HR person, if you're lucky enough to have one, or another person from the city, such as your city administrator or city clerk, someone you're comfortable working with. Remember, though, that the director hires other staff, and you do not have to have a second person with you in the interview if you don't feel you have a need for that. I've always found it helpful to have the other person, but it's not a requirement. Review your job description and job posting before the interview to remind yourself of what you're looking for. I also find it helpful to provide a copy to the applicant at the beginning of the interview. Determine the types of questions you'll ask based upon the job description. Have the same people conduct the interviews and ask the same questions of each candidate, and use your rubric to indicate comments and scores. Be sure to clear your calendar of other obligations when you conduct the interview, and schedule the interviews when you won't be disturbed. So either when the library is closed or when you have another person to watch the desk for you. This is where you choose your candidates. This may be easier said than done, unless one candidate just really shines above the rest. If this is the board hiring a director, then the board will want to make a formal vote to decide which candidate to offer the position to. However, if it's the director hiring another library staff, the director simply needs to make a decision. You may want to add a plan B to speed things along. In other words, if candidate A declines the offer, we then will offer the job to the next preferred candidate. Do not announce your decision or make an offer until after you've gone through a few more of these steps, as follows. Before you officially announce your preferred candidate, you will want to check that person's references. Often this is as simple as an online verification. Did the person really formally work at that location? Or a quick phone call can likewise help with verification. Take the time to call the person's references, even though they are people that person suggested. Have a list of established questions you plan to ask those references. Keep the time with that person short so they're doing you a favor by responding to your questions. Questions I've been asked as a reference include these. Is the person good at working in a team? Does this person have self-motivation? Would you rehire this person? That to me is always a key question. What would you describe as this person's best strength? And assuming you've seen our job description, which of the areas do you think the person may have the most difficulty accomplishing? First, check with your city attorney before asking any questions of any references. In many cases, the only information the reference can provide is that the applicant worked there from this date to that date. It doesn't mean they were a bad employee. It's just an HR rule that many cities follow. So be aware of that. This is also the time you'll conduct any background checks or drug screenings, depending on your city's policies for new hires. Make sure you have confirmed these kinds of requirement details before you ever post the job. And also realize that our law librarian, Mandy Easter, advises against the library individually conducting background checks if it's not a citywide requirement for other city employees. Specifically, here is what Mandy says on the topic. And I quote, "There are no state laws mandating background checks or drug tests for public officers or employees. The library board, when hiring a director, and the director, when hiring staff, should follow the city's established processes and procedures. In other words, if there is no citywide policy or municipal ordinance in place affirmatively requiring background checks and/or drug tests, the library should do neither, or it risks a hiring discrimination lawsuit. When these tests are required by an employer, they are administered only to the prevailing candidate after that candidate has accepted the offer of employment, conditional, of course, on the assumption that he or she will pass the tests. So the tests are not given to every applicant, just the one to whom an offer is made and subsequently accepted," end quote. Assuming you've received good references about the candidate, it's now time to offer the position to your preferred candidate. This can be done via a phone call, but should be done by sending a follow-up hiring letter. The call will be made by the director if hiring other library staff, or likely by the board president if hiring the director. Ideally, it will be made by someone the candidate has already, the candidate has already corresponded with and/or will remember. The hiring letter will simply state in writing the fact that you are hiring the person as whatever job title of your library, the start date, the fact that it's full-time or part-time, salaried or hourly, the approximate number of hours of work expected each week, and the pay scale. It might also list benefits. Talk with your city about such a letter and verify again that you have all the details correct before contacting the winning applicant. Once the applicant agrees to the offer, you'll need to notify the other applicants, including all who applied that were not selected for the position. A form email or snail mail, if you prefer, although not particularly appreciated by the recipients, can suffice. I always try to call the candidates I've interviewed, although in most cases, I just end up leaving a message, but they appreciate it. Establish a 3-month, 6-month, and/or 1-year evaluation period for your new hire. I recommend a 3-month or at least a 6-month evaluation in the first year. Let the employee know about these evaluations in advance of the hire. In fact, I have heard of some libraries that stipulate a probationary hire period of 3 to 6 months. You'll need to acclimate and train your new employee. Standard number 25 states that a planned orientation program is needed for all employees, so think about that ahead of time. Your district consultant can assist with general questions and even with helping you design a training outline. If it's a new director, that your library's just hired, your district consultant should be notified immediately in order to set up a new director orientation. Training for the new employee should also be established prior to the employee's arrival. Who will provide it? What will you include? Prepare a packet of info that includes things such as the following: library policies and procedures. If you have those in a book, even better. If not, give copies. A calendar of events, a list of coworkers and contacts. For directors, all of the above, plus a list of city employees, their positions and contact information, location of contacts regarding building and assorting systems such as your ILS, your IT, your HVAC system, your alarm, your sprinkler system, etc. Copies of past director reports and board minutes, at least 3 months worth, and a district consultant's name and contact info. You want to be organized and clear. Know that you're going to cover what you're going to cover and when. This is in your orientation. Express expectations clearly and confirm that the employee understands what you're saying. Another thing is you want to have other employees make sure, if you have other employees, you want to make sure that they know the new person is arriving and have them assist with part of the training, especially if they'll work together. And then setting and confirming expectations. For example, arrive with time to take off your coat, use the restroom, and get your cup of coffee. Don't do those things on your work time unless you want to claim your 15-minute break when you arrive at 8 a.m. Here's a sample orientation plan that Marianne Morey put together based on her experience as a library director and manager. It could be tweaked as needed for any size library. These have some good ideas to include in whatever plan you put together for a new employee. So kind of looking at going over your library circulation system and your catalog. Look at the different parts of that, show them that. On-the-job training, so time at the circ desk partnered with another employee or yourself. Questions and answers with the director are always good because it helps clarify what those expectations are and any little details. And some downtime for continuation of training, webinars, and or program planning. And it lets them, give them some time to learn your website, that type of thing. And then a period of review. So setting goals for your evaluation. Now's the time to set goals with your new employee for whatever your review period, whether it's a probationary period or for the upcoming year. By setting mutually agreed upon goals, the new staff member has a very good idea of your expectations and of what the job will be like during this time. This is also discussed in the endorsement session on evaluations. It's in your best interest to have a probationary period. If for any reason the relationship with the new hire doesn't work out, you can terminate at the end of this period without any ramifications. If you're having problems and don't take advantage of a probationary period, then the process to terminate an employee becomes much harder. Of course, the new employee might also decide that the job isn't what they were expecting and use this time to decide not to stay. It works both ways. So that's all for this session. I hope you have a better understanding of all the various aspects of the hiring process. Remember, there's some recorded videos you can watch to get more information, especially the one on HR and the law. If you do the hiring process right, you increase the potential for getting a great new employee.